The summer transfer market is off to a busy start with some of the biggest names already on the move. Throughout the window, I'll be analysing the transfer plans of the Premier League's biggest clubs with a little help from our dedicated club writers at The Athletic and our sponsors over at Manscaped. Your team could be next, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Okay, well, I'm delighted to be joined by one of our Arsenal correspondents. You all know him, James McNicholas. And we're going to start by asking you, James, what business have Arsenal done so far?
Well, the first signing they announced this summer was that of the teenage Brazilian forward, McNicholas, who arrived from Sao Paulo. But they've also got other business in the bag. Matt Turner, which is a deal that was struck in January for a new substitute goalkeeper. That will be completed very, very soon at the time of talking. And also we know about the imminent arrival of Fabio Vieira from Porto. So 3 signings practically in the bag for Arsenal. It's got their summer business underway.
What do you make of them, James?
I think they're all very interesting deals. I mean, Turner was an obvious one that they needed to do. It looks like Bernd Leno is going to leave the club. We reported on interest from Fulham. That's as yet unresolved, but obviously he lost his first team place. So it makes sense that he would look to depart. And Turner, he's experienced. He's a US international. I know they think very, very highly of him at Arsenal. So interested to see how he gets on. Big stylistic adaptation for him from going from a team who kick it long to one who want to play out from the back. That's going to be his major challenge. McNicholas, it's a bit of a punt, really. He's not played a great deal of first-team football, but Arsenal have great connections in South America, scouts on the ground. Edu's got his experience there. And they think they've seen something there that's worth persisting with, worth trying with. They're going to have a look at him this summer and decide if they're going to keep him around the first-team squad, send him out on loan. And then Fabio Vieira, which I think is the one that's probably going to get Arsenal fans most excited. He's had a fantastic season at Porto, particularly in the second half of the season. Once Luis Diaz left the club, he kind of became their main creative outlet in the team. He's had some fantastic form, great pedigree. Bit of a punt just because he's only got 1 full season of first-team football under his belt, really. But the talent is obvious. And Arsenal, they've taken the gamble, they've taken him on. Be fascinating to see how he copes in the Premier League.
I think it's actually been quite an encouraging start to the window for Arsenal. Still relatively early days, a long way to go. The season does start earlier in the Premier League, so they'll want to get as much as they can done as soon as they can. And on that note, how much of their overall business do you think they have done so far at Arsenal?
Well, I think there's a way to go yet. You know, we've all talked about some key positions that they would be looking at in this summer, principally that number 9 spot. And as long as that goes unfilled, then, you know, there is a big, big job ahead of Arsenal. We all know who the main target is, Gabriel Jesus. Arsenal are working on that deal at the moment. But yeah, that'll be right at the top of their agenda as something still to do. A left-sided defender is another thing we've talked about. Lisandro Martinez, a player they admire enormously at Ajax, a deal Arsenal would like to get done. That would tick off another need for them. He's someone who can cover, yes, at centre-back, but also at left-back and even in holding midfield. So I think he's a really attractive player in that respect. And then there may be the possibility of another central midfield player. Isn't that right, David? I mean, it may depend, though, on what happens with some of the outgoings in the squad.
Yeah, definitely. So you've touched there upon Gabriel Jesus. At the time of recording this, there's no agreement between Manchester City and any other club. I think most likely we can expect that to be Arsenal, but they've got to get to the fee that Manchester City are prepared to accept. And I don't think Manchester City are going to drop their demands. We think that things are relatively okay on the player side. So yeah, as you say, that takes that number 9 position. There was a point at which Arsenal were looking at maybe getting in 2 new strikers, but Eddie Nketiah has signed a new contract. I'll come back to that with you in a minute. And then there are other possibilities. So you've talked about Lisandro Martinez. Arsenal are really strongly in for him. So we'll see how that develops. They may face some competition. Raphinha is one that I'm going to ask you about in more depth in a moment. The fans are all talking also about Youri Tielemans. Now, we know there is interest in Youri Tielemans, and things haven't really developed since that was known, which was quite a long time ago. We think it might take a fee in the region of £25 million. He's only got a year left on his contract. Leicester need to sell if they're going to do the business that they want to do. And Tielemans has been identified, we think, as maybe the main outgoing at Leicester this summer. It's not guaranteed to happen. And at this point in time, things aren't really moving as far as we know. It could require an outgoing to happen. We'll come on to outgoings in a moment as well. I'm just going to throw it back to you first, though, and get you to continue on the others that you haven't mentioned, such as Raphinha.
Yeah, Raphinha. I mean, obviously, that's a player that Arsenal really like. They're not alone in that. I think most people will have heard of the interest from Barcelona. And to be honest, I think many people assumed that that was where Raphinha would end up. But it's not as simple as that. Barcelona need to come up with the funds required to appease Leeds, and that's not straightforward in their position. Arsenal, they do have a bit more flexibility financially at the present time, and they really, really, really like this player. So it's a fascinating one that I'm curious to see how it plays out. You know, will Leeds ultimately decide we're going to take the money from another Premier League club if it's on offer? At the present time, we don't think it's developed to that stage. We know Arsenal are very, very keen on the player, but we don't think there's any serious, intensive negotiations at this point in time between the two clubs. But who knows? In the coming days, that could change because this is a player they really like.
Yeah, as we said, that could change. These things can change at very short notice. And Raphinha, like we said, Lisandro Martinez, very strong interest, and not the only ones, because we think that Chelsea like Raphinha a lot. And his preference in all of this, which is quite well documented, is Barcelona. And it seemed it would have happened if Leeds were relegated. Much tougher now they've stayed up because of the financial situation at Barcelona. And that appears to have opened the door to the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea. Chelsea present Champions League football, but they're still getting their recruitment plans together. They also, as I understand it, would quite like to play him as a wing back. I'm not sure if he would want that. And so we know there's a relationship between Deco, the player's agent, and Edu, Arsenal's technical director. And we hear that he's a player that Mikel Arteta would really like. So we just have to see how that develops, and also whether Nicola Pepe plays a role in this, because you would assume that given Arsenal are open to him departing, if they get a reasonable fee, in the region of 25-30 million pounds for a club record signing that hasn't worked out so well. And we think that he's open to leaving as well. Does that have to happen first? Could they get Raphinha in first and then Pepe out later? A lot of moving parts here. So let's talk, therefore, about some potential outgoings, James. Who do you see leaving? Off the top of my head, you've got situations involving Hector Bellerin, William Saliba's coming back, Nuno Tavares maybe going out on loan. What else? You talk us through it.
Well, yeah, there's a number of players, David, who were out on loan last season. You mentioned a couple there. I think Hector Bellerin, Pablo Mari, Lucas Torreira. These are all guys I would expect to leave the club. There's a few other that I think are more in question. Somebody like Reiss Nelson, you know, what decision will Arsenal make on him? He had a good loan spell in Holland, but no indications that he plays a major part in Mikel Arteta's plan, so he could go. Matteo Guendouzi's deal has been made permanently in Marseille. That was agreed effectively 12 months ago. Bernd Leno, we mentioned, another who could depart. I still think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Saliba. I mean, all the indications are positive. The manager, Mikel Arteta, is saying the right things. Saliba himself is saying the right things. But I think until he gets back in the squad in preseason training and gets a sense of where he stands in the pecking order, I still think there's a little bit of doubt about that situation, in my personal opinion. But I think they're the major ones. Granit Xhaka, I think, is an interesting situation. I wrote about this towards the end of last season.
Yep.
You know, he very nearly left the club last season. There was a lot of interest from Roma and Serie A, and I think he would have been happy to go there and play under Jose Mourinho. That option is not available to him this summer. They've signed Nemanja Matic, which I think closes the door really on their interest in Xhaka. There's been some talk of interest from Germany. Is this the point in time where he might want a new challenge, where 2 years out from the end of his contract, will Arsenal take the opportunity to cash in on a player they spent a lot of money to bring in? I think that's still in question. But if they do want to add another central midfielder, as we mentioned before, it might be something that's necessary in terms of the balance of the squad, but also the balance of the wage bill.
Busy times at Arsenal, and it seems quite a lot of money might be spent, but it's not an unlimited fund, so they'll be looking to generate some revenue through potential outgoings that you talk about there to help them balance things out in that way. But one player who is neither coming nor going, he's staying, is Eddie Nketiah. So he signed a new long-term contract with the club. He also took on a very famous shirt number. So what's your analysis of that renewal and also the decision to give him the number 14 shirt?
Well, in the first instance, I think it's quite an interesting renewal. Mikel Arteta was always insistent that he wanted to keep Eddie Nketiah, full of praise for him in every press conference. And actually, towards the end of the season, he made him the first choice striker. And in fairness to Eddie, he responded by scoring goals, kept Alex Lacazette on the bench in the run-in. But whether or not he envisaged keeping him on the kind of salary he's ultimately had to, I don't know. Eddie was in a very strong position where he was approaching the end of his contract. He would have had some pretty lucrative offers from elsewhere. And to an extent, Arsenal have had to match that, or at least come close to it, which I think is an interesting decision sort of in the context of their overall wage structure. But when it comes on to the player himself, look, they like him. They think he's got goals in him. He's relatively untested still at top flight level. So the question is going to be, can he produce the kind of form he showed at the end of the season consistently? But for Arsenal, they've saved some money. If they qualified for the Champions League, maybe they would have thought we'll go out and buy another striker, but that would have cost them a lot more in terms of the transfer fees. Eddie, he's already on the books. He's cost them nothing really in his development, having come through the academy. And so they'll feel like it's quite an efficient deal to keep him. As for the number 14, I'm pretty relaxed about that. I mean, Arsenal have made it clear that their academy players are a big part of their identity, and that's reflected in some of the shirt numbers they've handed out. Emil Smith-Rowe wearing number 10, Bukayo Saka wearing number 7. And I think, if anything, those shirts have inspired those players to go on to bigger and better things. And hopefully the number 14 will do the same for Eddie.
Absolutely. James, well, we wish him the best. And Arsenal for the season ahead, you'll be covering it for The Athletic. So we look forward to reading, listening to your stuff, watching you on here, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.